Hello there, good afternoon. Welcome back to Celtic World Order podcast. As always, I'm Steve O'Matt, and it's a welcome to yourselves back here at the channel for another bit of a post-mortem, picking through the bones. It's the morning after the night before. Massive disappointment. Dismal versus Kairat Almaty last night as we obviously crashed out, as we all well know. We came on here late last night, and over 300 of you stuck with us to the small wee hours to discuss that. There was a lot of anger. There was a lot of frustration, and rightfully so. A lot of emotions high at the time, but now, a good while after the event, the best part, 18 hours or so after the event, actually more, can we sit there and say to ourselves that that was as bad as it was? Did we get what we deserved? Absolutely nothing's changed. We're no suddenly all right with it. That's the way it is. But I took time this morning, and for my sins, I watched back the game because I really wanted to know, was it quite as bad as I thought it was? Yes, it was. It was absolutely horrendous. It was quite possibly one of the worst games that I've ever saw Celtic play, any Celtic side play, and as long as I can remember. I've tried to list off the things that I would probably rather have seen again or experienced. I probably have been tied to a chair and have my kneecaps drilled, my fingertips chopped off with pliers. They were right up there, red hot pokers to the eyes. That was definitely up there with things that I would probably be of preferring to have to sit through than that again. But it is for the balance of, shall we call it, curiosity. Maybe I'm just a masochist, but there you go. Sat and watched that again. And yes, nothing has changed last night. But now, with things being a wee bit sort of cold like a day, where the emotions aren't quite as high, I just wanted to sit and talk and go over my thoughts on it. We've done a lot of talking last night. Obviously, in that high emotion, it's quite hard to really pinpoint certain things and look at certain things. But now, with a sort of calmer head, I'm able to look at it and really pick through it. And I stick by, and I will say this: I stick by my, I s- you know, I s- I'm lost for words here, but I stick by what I said last night. That this result, this shortcoming, is shouldered with the manager and with the players. Don't get me wrong, I have said this firmly, I'll repeat it again. The board, the powers that run the club, they are the biggest portion, they're the 80% easily of the issue here with their high risk approach to Champions League or European qualifying, whatever you want to call it, high risk strategy. People say risk averse. I repeat, our Celtic board are not risk averse. They are spending money averse, but they are high risk, high stakes when it comes to these situations. Because when we look back and tomorrow, or sorry, tonight, this game, there you go, last night's game, sorry, is just a footnote on that. We look at the other times we've had to qualify. Look at the Barron run, 2019, 2018. Qualifiers failed, didn't tool up. Anytime that we've really had to push it out, we've had the make or break, we've had the crunch, then that's the difference. That's when we've not done it. That's when this high stakes thing hasn't come into play. But that's always been the way it is. They risk everything. For what reason, I don't know why. But for balance, Dermot Desmond, Michael Nicholson, Peter Wall didn't make our players garbage last night. They didn't make Maeda miss the sitter. They didn't make Benjamin Negrin with the few chances he had. They didn't make Cal McGregor constantly make a backward pass. They didn't make Carter Vickers look like he couldn't even be bothered to be there. So on and so forth. Run through the team. Ask yourself honestly, is that the board's fault? I'm not a board backer. People don't like me saying that. But there has to be a slight turning. The tide needs to turn a wee bit, and we need to focus on the people that put it all together. Undoubtedly, the board, I'll say it again, they're the top of the tree. They're the biggest issue. They're the overarching issue. But last night was lost on a football pitch by players and by a manager who should have more than enough in the tank. more than enough credentials, capability to get a job done. Because Kairat Almaty, I repeat, were the lowest ranked team of any team faced off by a Scottish side in Europe. And that includes your Hearts, your Aberdeens, your Hibs, Rangers, who are all going through lower quality Champions League, Conference League, Europa League qualification. They are the lowest of the low. They're a team whose squad value is under 15 million, and Celtic's is circa about 130. And yes, we could have been doing with extra bodies, we could have rotated, we could have helped ourselves, we could have made it a wee bit easier, but we didn't. And there's no excuse. Don't want to chuck the transfer fees at you, but you know them by now. Adam Ida, Arne Engels, as well as some of the values or perceived values of some of the guys that are on that pitch. And they can't get the job done. That's a tactics, that's a managerial, that's a player hunger, a desire problem. That's not a you didn't buy us an extra player problem. So anyway, I will try my best. I'm on here more again. I'm doing the hard yards here. I'm doing the ugly job for Celtic World Order, coming out and facing up twice, 2 in a row, this garbage. Now, get me some up your thoughts here. Is there anything you want to bring up? As I said last night, try and keep it clean. I know we're all angry, but let's keep it clean. Let's keep it all above board. I know it's easy to lose yourself when the emotions run high, but let us know your thoughts on it. Is this 100% a board issue only? Or are we as fans right? Should we be calling out the manager? Should we be calling his bluff to an extent? Because yes, he was needing players, he's been pleading for players and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, he didn't change it up. He couldn't find a way. He stuck to the formula. And then it's easy for a manager to hide behind exactly what I've just said. We needed reinforcements, we needed freshness, and we also, the pitch was poor and garbage like that. We needed freshness. Maybe we need fresh ideas. Now, I'm not saying sack the manager. I'm not saying that. But I mean, fresh ideas. Learn to adapt, learn to mix it up, and actually have a bona fide plan B and maybe just a plan C rather than just throwing the same shit at the wall and hoping some of it sticks. So I'll try and get up some of them. Thank you very much. There we are, 420, the original. He is exactly. That's how I feel, mate. That's exactly what you're saying there. And like some of the emotion stuff, I can't utter pish. You know what? There's no other way of saying it. You can't dress that up, can you? It was utter garbage. And yes, Jay, I did. I sat and watched the game again because it kind of passed me by last night. I was sitting watching the game and it was just, it was a blur. It was as if I couldn't believe what I was seeing. And a part of my focus of how bad it was taken away. But you know, when you watch something and it's that boring, it's that flat, it's like Groundhog Day. But I was actually watching the clock more and seeing that tick down. And because I thought to myself, and I said this to a few folk, I said this to Paddy yesterday, goes, my biggest concern is if this game gets to 70, 75 minutes and it's 0-0, my biggest fear came alive. I was watching how long have we got left in this game? How long have we got left in this game? Because I just had that feeling in the deep of my gut that as soon as it hit that 70, 75 minutes, that it wasn't going to happen. Part of that is because of the quality or lack thereof that we have on the bench, but just knowing that it was going there as well. Yep, and the English podcasts are slagging us. Absolutely. And last night, people didn't like it, and there could well be people today. Folk didn't like outsiders, if you want to call it that, coming into the likes of this podcast or other platforms and taking pot shots, slagging off Celtic. Celtic deserve absolutely everything that comes their way. And to an extent, we don't deserve it in terms of the result. But what I mean is see the slaggings that you will probably get from maybe friends or work colleagues or whatever it is from outside the Celtic sphere, slagging us off. We kind of do deserve it a wee bit in that respect. Not, we don't deserve the result, but we do deserve the criticism. We do deserve the wind-ups and the slaggings that we get because, as we say, look at how we've been dining out on the failures of Rangers in the league, dined out on Rangers last week, and dare I say it, touch wood, if and hopefully when they go out tonight, we will probably dine out on that as well. We will. It's the nature of football fandom, and you've just got to take it in the chin. I know that's easy to say. You've got to take that side of it on the chin, but what we can't take on the chin and what we can't take lying down is the mismanagement of our club. The mismanagement at all levels of the club, and I do say at all levels, it's unfashionable. We do these podcasts, and of course, we'll always be 100% honest, 100% uncensored. We're unbiased. We're not in cahoots with anybody at the club. What you see here is our opinion as we see it, as we think it. We don't hold back. And, you'd like to see, if you've been watching us by now, that we're very, very honest in all aspects of the football club, from those that run the club to the manager to player performances. And a lot of the time, people don't like criticism. It's one thing about Celtic fans. I think that we can be a little bit thin-skinned, and the board certainly will be thin-skinned, because despite another failing in Europe last night, then you will look at it and they will point us to how many trophies have we won, how many medals do our players have, so on and so forth. But that's the problem that we find ourselves in. We have been domestically a powerhouse for the last 20 odd years. Now, yes, you've got to win those trophies. You've got to, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon, and you have to earn the right to lift those cups and have those medals as players. But it's always been against a backdrop of what ifs. It could have always been a lot better, and particularly with the European side where we don't size up. But again, and people don't like this brutal honesty, a lot of our recent history and success, yes, you have to win it, and that is commendable, and that's not to diminish those efforts. But it's been with nothing that really truly resembles a genuine challenge. No challenge. And the one time that we did hit a bump in the road, i.e., I've got to say it, the COVID season, we capitulated. Now, I know there was a lot of sort of dodginess at play there. The fact that Rangers, for some reason, were the only team that didn't have COVID suspensions and all that, it is a wee bit of conspiracy theory. But we as a club at that time, under immense pressure, and yes, it's a different gravy, it's a different way of looking at it, because we did have massive, suspensions or people out because of that situation. But again, we just couldn't find the togetherness. We couldn't find a joint up way of thinking. We couldn't find the answers to change, and we refused to change at any level until it was too late in that season. So I think that in terms of Celtic, there's an elite mindset of money making and a bleary-eyed idea of we are this big, massive club, but fundamentally we don't act like it. I think that there's a mentality block at Celtic in terms of ambition and in terms of pushing through real true adversity in this modern age. That's the big thing that I'm taking away from that. I'll try and bring up some of your comments there here. All we will get, Thomas, yes, it is what we'll get, is complete and utter silence from the board. Now, on the board, just before we start getting through it, and we'll go down wee windy roads and we'll tangent away, but that's the nature. There's a million and one things that are flying about my head. I'm sure there's a million and one things that are flying about your head here. With the board, someone has to be held to account. Undoubtedly. Will they? Probably the answer is 100% no, because it is, as we say, it's the bowling club mentality. It's the old boys club. They're the old pals act that they all just hang about and they all protect each other. And I went through it last night. You only need to look at it. In case you don't want to know again, let me just tell you about who our board of directors is. Michael Nicholson, CEO, as we know, for 2021. The guy that was the former Loyal, remember? He was a lawyer, club lawyer, been at the club for 12 years. Well and truly established now. Again, when we needed a CEO, wasn't it just amazing that the guy who just didn't happen to have any credentials, any background, any proven track record as a chief executive officer got the job? Brilliant. I was in house. Imagine that. It's brilliant. 12 years. The guy's been at the club. Chris Mackay, 9 years he's been at the club. Mr. Finance. Pedro Law, there since 2003. Dermot Desmond, 1995. Mr. Pseudo owner, 1995. Tom Allison, who, by the way, is meant to be he's a non-exec, right? But he's been there for 24 years. I mean, come on. Brian Wilson, 20 years. And then, of course, this is the fun bit. The ones that are supposed to be Brian Wilson, who's meant to be independent. These are the people who are supposed to be outside observing eyes, holding the board to the account. 20 years. How can you be objective about anything at a club and really poke and ask questions and prod about best practice and so on and so forth if you've been at the club for 20 years? Sharon Brown, non-executive again, independent. She's been at the club for 9 years. You're a bit long in the tooth, aren't you? You're set in your ways. The only person that's new to the board is Brian Rose, 2023, and that's it. But that's stale, and as it says there on the tagline, stale on and off the pitch from the top down. It's stale, but undoubtedly the boardroom is the biggest problem there, and we will get nothing there. Now, the question I ask, and as Thomas is saying, we'll get silence to the board, is who will be held to account, if anybody? When we done our board focus special, when we really deep dived the board and went in 2-footed on them to tell you exactly just what I've said there, the shortcomings, the old boys act, where they're all best pals. That's the problem. It's a new dynasty, it's a new status quo, and no one gets held to account. Now, I just want to bring up this absolutely depressing graphic. I've showed you a few times now, but it's very important to see and have a look at this. There you go. 2017, we get past Kazakhstani opposition. We then fail 4 on the bounce. Now, as we well know, the money's increased for the Champions League bounty since then, right? But essentially, if you were to go on the average and just say minimum rate, you earn about £40 million, right? There you go. It's about £160 million, isn't it? That's sitting there, 4 years of failure, qualifying round 3, AEK Athens, Cluj, and then qualifying round 2 to Fenerbahce and Midtjylland. Now, seeing any other walk of life, any other industry, if you're the CEO, you're the man at the top, and ultimately you are in charge for a lot of decisions, strategic decisions. Strategic decisions for Celtic will, of course, be predominantly sponsors and income and so on and so forth. But the biggest one, the most important one, the strategic decisions, is transfer policy, because ultimately that affects what goes on the pitch, how you play, how you perform, and what you can win. See if you were in a company and for 4 years on a row, you lost someone or your company a minimum of £40 million of income like that, you would be sacked. Your position would be untenable. You would be told, there's the door, see you later, up the road. Yes, heads on the block. The heads should be on the block. Football's Life's coming in saying the members should be out, all the board members should be out of the club today. Do I think that that will happen? Absolutely not. And that is the sad, sad situation that we find ourselves in there. The board are a big issue. And there's the best thing here. Carter's saying it, they'll have an internal inquest on themselves and come to the conclusion. The same. The status quo remains. Here comes the big fat bonus. We've all seen that graphic. We've all seen how much they've made. But again, I come back to the guy who's at the top of it all. And ultimately, in my opinion, the most of the blame has to fall on, which is Michael Nicholson. This is a guy that was a club lawyer, and he overnight, with that immediate promotion, that unbelievable promotion, pretty much trebled, maybe quadded his original wage overnight. And as I said at the time, it's kind of like being the floor supervisor in Lidl, and then your manager saying, I've got something to tell you. You start the big job tomorrow. You are now CEO of Lidl UK. These things just don't happen. But they do at Celtic, and that's what you get. It's the old cliche, you reap what you sow, don't you? You completely do reap what you sow. There we go. There's the board. Everybody's saying it, and that's the thing. Yes, Ryan, as I've just said, it is a sackable offence, but it won't be. This is the problem. And as I said last night, it got lost in the shuffle of all the chat. We were sitting there and I was trying to ask the question, how can we affect meaningful change? Now we've went down and we'll talk a wee bit about the idea, how can we make your voice heard? Well, the most meaningful way, the best way to influence change is undoubtedly trying to get fan representation on that board. Now, that is a stumbling block in itself because they're not going to have an independent person to come in. But then, of course, you also have the big question of who would it be? Let's just say we got something together. There would be big question marks over that person. Are they suitable? Will they be the voice that we want, or will they just fall into the ways of the board and be conditioned? Because that's what's happened. We as a fan base have been conditioned for years, and it's crazy to think it's only recently, it's only after the likes of last week and even some of the shortcomings last season that fans have really started to get a lot more vocal with it. Things have got a wee bit visceral, it's got a wee bit toxic at times. Sometimes fans, and I know emotions run high, can go too far, but it's good to see that the focus is turning and that people are doing it, because for too long there's been what some will call happy clappers, people that have been conditioned, folk that can't see past the green tinted specs, that everything Celtic do is great. When we talk about shortcomings, but they'll say, aye, but we spent X amount, forgetting that we brought in a much larger Y amount here. Things like that. Or they'll point us to the trophies that we've won. Why are we moaning domestic success? And the expectations have been brought so far down that just staying 1 point ahead of Rangers and winning the league every season is domestic bliss, and that's bliss in enough in itself, and there's no real desire to push on. There's a lot of that, but that seems to be turning. People are waking up. But I want to talk about that facts and figures there, because this is going to be a big point. We're going to talk about spending and things like that. I had a little run through it. Now, these are approximate, right? And I'll bring up again the dreaded graphic because I just want to show you an oversight of it. I had a little look before I came on, and I asked the question from that 2017 to 2018 season right up to the now 25 to 26. I had a look. How much does Celtic spend on incomings? How much did they earn from outgoings? And what's the overall? Now, I ran through it. Now, bear in mind, this won't be very specific in terms of like, oh, in the summer, we had this amount of profit. By January, this and so on. It's the whole calendar year. It's the 17 to 18 season, 18 to 19, so on and so forth. But I'll run through it. In 2017, of which we got past Astana, players in, and there is in euros, because unfortunately a lot of the data's out there in euros, but it still gives you a good snapshot. Incomings were roughly 12 million euros for that season, and out what we brought in was a mere 1.5 million euros. So I actually spent money. About 10.5 million euros went out there. You go into this 2018, 19, 20, 21 phase where it's barren. 18 season, 14.5 million euros was spent. We brought in 31.09, gives you about 16.5 plus. The 19 to 20 season, we brought in players to the value of roughly 20.2 million. We then put out sales 27.4, but plus 7.17 million euros. 20 season to 21, we spent 15.7. We brought in 17.76. We're just over 2 million euros in plus. 21 to 22 season, incomings about 26.5 million euros we spent. Incoming on players going out the way, 37.6 million euros, giving us a plus 11.14. Then we start getting a bit more recent when we got those direct entries. The 2022 to 23 season, we spent 28.8 million pounds on players coming in. 13.55 went out in that whole season, which was a spend about 15.25 million. 2022 to 23, we spent 27.46. Incoming was a whopping 46.19 million euros, plus 18.7 million. And then the last two seasons, 24 to 25, we spent, it's according to this, about 45 million euros. But outgoings, 56.18, plus 10.78. And this season alone, the 25 to 26 season, we find ourselves incomings, the incomings that were brought into the club are only about 3 million, with about 23 going out plus in the profit. So over that piece of what I've just read you, we sit about 61 million pounds. 61 million pounds sitting over that 2017 right up to current day in just sheer player sales alone. whilst bringing in players. Now, again, is that good? Yes, it needs to be steady. It's a good income stream. It shows that we are managing to do it. But ask yourself deep down, is the quality there? Is the quality there? And that 60.46 million could have been so much more because we had 4 years of not making the Champions League. So theoretically, we could have spent a lot more during that period, starting with the first one where we failed to get in, starting with the 2018 season, spend to get into that Champions League. It gives you that there. And as Ryan says, what I've just read to you there, that is just sales. That's just transfers. That's what we sell versus what we bring in, around £60 million since 2017. But as I say, it could have been so much more, because the net result is if we go and spend more at the front end, we make those Champions Leagues, that 4 seasons that we don't cut the cloth for seasons that we don't make the Champions League. You know, we've heard that for Peter Wall. That's stark, because we could have brought in better quality, which ultimately would have resulted in them being in a bigger shop window, and as we've seen, making more money. We talk about Bruges, we talk about Sporting Lisbon, we talk about Porto, we talk about sides of that sort of size. They should be the DNA, they should be the blueprint for, or the green print, if you don't like me saying blue, for Celtic's transfer strategy. Because I bet you if you look over that period there, they will have eclipsed that 60. That's when you realise that Celtic are wannabe big club stuff. We act, we use the history, the fan base, the atmosphere, all the birthday card push to create this big, massive picture of how we are this amazing institution, which we are. I'm not saying that we're a huge institution in world football. We're football and royalty historically. But at this moment in time, we aren't. We don't match ambitions. And it's crazy to think that teams that, like I've just mentioned, are going out and they're cultivating players. They're bringing in that season where they had the plus, we had the plus 18, 20 million. They throw that and spend that, but then they put an extra 10 or so in front of it. They go through a couple of seasons where they have a negative on, they've spent money. They've actually spent more than they've brought in. But then that cycles round and they add and they chip up and they go to the next stage. So we're at that stage where we're thinking 9 million, 11 million pound signings is great. But as I've said before, the reality is, cast your mind back. That's really just 4 million, 3 million and so on type of signings when we're increased for inflation. Look back to 2003 fees, look back to even 1994, 95, 96. You know, bringing in guys like Alan Stubbs for £4.5 million. What would Alan Stubbs be by inflation now? So we don't adapt, we don't evolve, we don't move with the times, we stay stuck in our ways, and that is the problem. And Steve, would you know, I would absolutely, it's barren, isn't it? And as Loopy's pointing out, talking back to that graphic, look at some of the names that we have mentioned. Add Kairat Almaty to that list. That in itself is a sackable offence for anybody that's attached to that. Now, Brendan Rodgers sits and laughs tongue-in-cheek, but he kind of half means it, doesn't he? Where he says, there's no such thing as sack the board, it's normally sack the manager. Well, as I says, I'm not quite at that stage. I don't think that we're going to have to face that. Somebody needs it. Somebody needs it in the neck. I think this board are at a real crossroads. In fact, how many crossroads have they been, actually? They're maybe more at roundabouts. They're maybe more like at East Kilbride, aren't they, where you meet a roundabout every other couple of yards. That's the Celtic board, because they've came to these crossroads time after time after time, and they've not really done anything meaningful to really show direct change. The one time that we did, actually, we headhunted a guy called Dom Mackay. Remember that? When we actually did try to be forward thinking and we went out there. That was a big crossroads, and that was a massive period, a swing of change. We landed on our feet in terms of with our manager, but that was a point where they looked like they were going in the right direction. The fan engagement, the buying of players at an early stage, and so on and so forth. Now, we all know, or at least we're told, that the downfall of Dom Mackay was that he didn't have it up here from a footballing standpoint. From a CEO of a huge sporting organisation side, yes, he did, because he's proven his worth. That's why he went from being the top of Scottish rugby to being the top of European rugby. and now finds himself the CEO of the Scottish events campus. Huge, massive job. So he's not really that bad. But the problem is he didn't have a footballing background, and we hear that the problem was not necessarily going out and spending the money and bringing these guys in, but the contracts that were negotiated where there was low value sell-ons or release clauses, and the board would, and with an extent, I will say maybe rightfully so, have went, "What you doing, mate? We can get more for the guys." So yeah, that's a wee bit of a fall. But then that's for our board. That then reflects poorly on the board for bringing him in, but not realizing that he needed to be chaperoned, that he needed a hand, that he needed someone attached to him to get him up to speed. Now, I'm not saying somebody that's already inbuilt at the club to, condition his mind to go in the crappy old boring board way that we went for years. They could have been doing with bringing him in a director of football, just throwing it out there. I'm not saying, because again, old boys act, but as Kev Graham says when he was talking about it, even if it was somebody like Gordon Strachan, for talking's sake, or as we're seeing now, a Sean Maloney, but somebody who's in the football ground, even somebody like a Tisdale. I mean, what's Tisdale doing? But again, just on the optics of he's a guy that knows football business, or we're told that knows football business. He knows transfer markets, he knows fees, he knows sell-on, so on and so forth. That could have instilled that bit of information, teach them, work them up on that side of the business, because it's business and it's football business. He was top tier on the business side, but he came down on the football side because he'd never experienced it. That's a failing of those that run the club as well when he came in, because he was left high and dry. You can't bring a guy in who, for example's background is food and beverage and expect him to suddenly know the ins and outs of an IT company. In the same way, you can't bring in a guy from international rugby where there isn't transfer fees and agents and negotiations, and thrust him in to club football and expect him to know the ins and outs of transfer dealings. It's stupidity. He should have been trained up. He should have had someone to show him the reins and guide him. And if he'd done that, then I think we probably could have still had Don McKay around. But then the other side of that comes in, and why don't we have Don McKay around? Because what we are talking about right now, wanting change, looking at things objectively, seeing where we can be better, where we can be class leading. Remember that. World class in everything we do. I genuinely believe that that's what Don McKay was doing, and I will stick by that. That'll be the hill I die on. I think he's come in and looked at the tenures of those people that I've mentioned to you and asked the questions. How long have you been here? Essentially, show me your track record. Show me what you've done for this club. What is your vision for this club? And maybe thought, we need change because that sounds a bit outdated. And essentially what you get is all the pals conversion, because we might have our jobs on the line. And before you know it, the potential beacon of hope, the real light, is extinguished. And here comes the lawyer, because he was the best guy who was in the job. Funny that. And know what else is also quite funny? How a lot of them kind of went to the same school. That's quite funny. Never mentioned, but also quite funny. But let's get back to it. We're sitting here, we've went on our tangent, we've down our rabbit hole talking about the board. But I think first and foremost, if Celtic wanted to show any real change, even if it's just for decoration, even if it's just throwing red meat to the masses, if you're Michael Nicholson, you've got to be replaced. That would be a huge, huge statement. And it's true. I do believe that. I think that is completely true. And that's the thing. When we look at it, it's just there's no will to change. There's no will to move forward. It would be a huge, huge decision to change a CEO. But as I says, CEOs of any good company worth their salt, they're make and break themselves. They live and die. Their reputations live and die on results. In particular, a lot of that will be financial results. And that one there, that's a huge financial result. That's a negative dive bomb for you. That's exactly the kind of thing that you should be getting asked serious questions. Are you fit for purpose? But on top of that as well, they need to start communicating. How many times have we said that? He's the invisible man, Michael Nicholson. When have you ever heard that guy speak? direct to the fan base. When have Celtic actually put out a personalised statement from the CEO or anyone at that club? It's normally club statement. We at Celtic Football Club, it's generic pish. And usually it's to tell you about the new sponsorship deal, the new kit launch, the season ticket renewal. The next one you'll get the club statement or the email will be your Europa League package that they want you to buy. When have we actually really had truly a sit down with any of these people that run our club to tell us? We had Tisdale's football workshop where apparently he brought in selected people and told them the vision of how we're going about our business. Why is that not filmed? Why is that not put out on the YouTube channel? Why is that not put out on Celtic TV? Why is that not on the Celtic website for all to hear and all to see? We hear about the rolling 5-year plan. What is the rolling 5-year plan? Nobody's sat down and told us it. And as much as we'll laugh at other things like your local council or the Scottish government or the British government or whatever's plans, their 2030 vision, whatever it is that they're trying to sell you, at least they come out and they publish it. You can read the 2030 vision, the dossier, you can read it, you can hear it. What is our plan? Wouldn't it be nice just for something as basic as that to come out and do it? Now, there's something I want to read to you. I was watching a Celtic State of Mind earlier on, and I hope Paddy from the show doesn't mind me pinching this, because if you haven't saw this or you haven't heard this, then I think everybody needs to hear it. So he says he was writing for 67 Hail Hail at the time. This is 2020, and it was a sit-down piece with Dermot Desmond. And he was asked about his vision in Europe 5 years ago. Strap yourself in if you haven't heard it. I'm paraphrasing. Dermot Desmond said, Europe is such an important yardstick for football progression at the club. On a sporting level, I think that the team we have now, bear in mind this is 2020, the team that we have now is as good as any of the past 25 years, and that's even without a Henrik Larsson in the side. If you ask me if this side in 2020 would beat the 2003 Seville side of Martin O'Neill, I'd say yes. Woo! Holy shitballs! Come on! What is going on? He was then asked, and this is the best bit, where do you see Celtic in 5 years' time? So 2025, Dermot Desmond's 2025 vision. I'd like to say that in 5 years' time, our side will be better than any other side, including those led by the legendary sides of Martin O'Neill, Gordon Strachan, Brendan Rodgers, first tenure, or Neil Lennon. 5 years, mate. We're here. We're living in it. Ask yourself this question. Firstly, 2020 team, does that beat the 2003 Seville Cup final team? No, it doesn't. And now, does the side that we have at this moment in time, Brendan Rodgers Mark II, is that better than the legendary sides led by Martin O'Neill, Gordon Strachan, Brendan Rodgers first time, and Neil Lennon? I love it. There you go. No chance. Absolutely not. Stevie Kennedy is rolling about the floor laughing. Absolutely no chance. That is some strong stuff. That's some strong medication that he's been on there, by the way, if that's what he thinks. But this is the one thing that these are the kind of things that we should be thrown back at him. Because that's apparently his vision for Celtic in 2025. But then we hear that everything channels through him. So top to bottom, it trickles down. CEO makes the decisions, bin, failed. But the man who's the largest shareholder or the majority shareholder, the guy that's called the owner of Celtic when he actually isn't, he's got a lot to answer for. Because there I've just read to you, paraphrased of course, what his bloody apparent vision for this club was in 2025, said 5 years ago. Better than Martin O'Neill teams, Stratton teams, Rodgers first time. Better than Ange, better than Neil Lennon. It's nowhere near it. as I say, there you go. Ida, Kenny, Yang, Ralston, take your pick. Add some more on top of that. No disrespect to them, but finishing a game last night with Dane Murray and Donovan on the pitch. Wow. Absolute wow. Now, I think both those guys handled themselves very well, gave really good account of themselves. They should be proud. Donovan came on and looked like a breath of fresh air. A breath of fresh air. Put to shame guys like Ralston and Kieran Tierney, by the way. But it shouldn't be the case. A guy like him shouldn't be thrust into that situation, desperately chasing. He should be nurtured at the right pace and brought in. So credit where it's due, but you've sift through that team. It's a mile off. This squad is simply not good enough. Exactly, Carla. You'll be our Scales. Scales are Bobo or Valharan. It's absolute crack stuff, isn't it? Would I take Ange back? I don't think Ange would come back. I really don't think that Ange would come back. I think that he will have probably felt that he'd hit his maximum at the club. I think that he might have different offers. I think if I was to be pushed and thinking where he might end up, I think he's maybe stock's a bit rubbish in the English Premier League and down there, because they do turn their nose up at, even though he won the Europa League with a pish Spurs side. I don't think that matters. They will just look at reputation, and I still think he cuts something a joke figure for whatever reason with them. But I think that he might have a yearning to finish up his time. He's getting on and going to international management, where that's been maybe like Greece or even a team in Greece, one of the bigger sides in Greece. I could see him doing that. I could see that being a sort of, a full circle type of thing for him. If he was available, do I think, would I approach him? Yes, I would. But again, it's gone back the way, isn't it? It's not evolving. It's shown a lack of ambition. And I think Brendan Rodgers, you could argue, showed a lack of ambition, but also at the same time, he was probably the outstanding candidate there. But one of the biggest questions that people keys it on there, you go to belly or Lisbon, I mean, go on, it's men on it. I love this that we're having fun with this. But the one thing I wanted to bring it back and talking about the managers, I'm not flipping and flopping and changing and turning on Brendan Rodgers, but I am saying he needs to shoulder a lot of the blame here. He can't be exonerated for blame. He can't be let off the hook. He doesn't change it. He doesn't set it up, and it's unpopular. And as I said before, we come on these podcasts and we say stuff, and you get criticised. You're damned if you do. You're damned if you don't. If you criticise a player, if you criticise the manager, you get called negative. You get slammed. If you tiptoe around it and praise, you get told there's been a happy clapper. So it's really a thing with hard one. But talking to the manager, I want to get into some of the fallout, some of the quotes. Firstly, let's start with the manager himself, because he said a wee quote here. I actually tried to load it up, but what I'll do is I'll just play it through here, and I want you to hear what you think about it. Let me know your thoughts on it. I'll put it up to you, and hopefully it will come through. As I say, so we'll hear what he's got to say about it.
Because last year we made some great strides. I've said before, we had a hint of what we could do at the level. And with the greatest respect, this was a great opportunity for us to be back there. But sadly, we won't be. It's hugely disappointing, and I really feel for this, the supporters that travelled all the way to be here, the effort and the commitment that they've shown to be here, and it's what we're bitterly disappointed for them, as well as ourselves, because we, the Champions League is. It's a wonderful competition. We've seen that last year. We've seen the progress. And it's a tough one to take, but like I said, we didn't do enough over the two games. We missed a huge opportunity. The last thing you want to do in football is manufacture your own stress. You don't. That's what you don't want to be doing. But I think all we can do now is we have to look at where we're at as a football club, and like I say, decide what way we want to go. And but at this moment in time, we can still have a very good season. The Europa League, some will say we deserve to be in that this year.
There we go. What do you think of the manager's thoughts? Now, the one thing that wasn't on the end of that is there was a follow-up question. And again, we talk about communication, we talk about dysfunctionality at our club. He was then asked, now that you are no longer in the Champions League, now that the riches that come with that aren't going to be there, will that affect your transfer budget? What is your transfer budget? Do you know what the answer was? I don't know. I mean, if you didn't laugh, you'd greet, wouldn't you? I don't know. That's absolutely pathetic. And here's the thing, as you're saying, manufacture your own stress. It tells all it does. It tells a million stories. And here's another wee fun thing that I dug out for you to have a look at. Because I said the other day when I was on last night, I said that previous to that, the situation we find ourselves in isn't exclusive. And that's why the overarching problem, the biggest part of the problem is the board. It's the running the club. It's the approach to transfers. It's the lack of vision, the lack of forward thinking. But you could cut and paste any manager at any given transfer window. And here's one here for you there. 2000, check a date on it, 14th of August 2018. Brendan Rodgers, Celtic should have strengthened in the summer. It's not rocket science. That's what he says. Brendan Rodgers, 2018, first tenure, saying the exact same thing. Here we are. We're backing at it. I hope so. I hope better days do come. I really, really do. It's hard. It's hard to look for something that's positive in it, and that's the thing. There's going to be a lot of fallout. There's going to be a lot of soul searching amongst fans. There's going to be a lot of frustration along fans and things like that, and that's definitely going to happen up. And thanks, Stephen. I appreciate the support. Thank you very much. That's kind words there. But yeah, we need to look at these things and we need to say, is history repeating itself over and over? And how far can we do that? As we said, if we want to make massive, meaningful change on the board, we need to look at how we can tap into getting fan representation on it. There's a large portion of fans with shares, small amounts of shares that are out there in the ether. If we can sort of, I guess you'd hear me, unionise it, bring them together, it would be good to have someone who has perhaps a higher stake in the club. And there is people there, as I say, for example, take Chris Traynor of Forest Media, Forest Hotels. He's got an 11% stake worth about £16 million. He's one of the highest drop down, and we're told he's a fan. He's not on the board. That could be through choice. I wonder what his thoughts are, because these guys invest and they want to see return on investment. But at the same time, if they are fans, they want to see that return on investment growing. I can only assume that this guy is a Rangers supporter. That's fine, as we say. I don't mind laughing at it, as what it is, but maybe clock in later on just in case. Keep your powder dry and all that. But yeah, I think we need to try and look at getting the fans pulled together, pulling together those small amounts of fan shares to come together as one, as an invested interest, because you can go in there as a chunk investment, pull all those shares together, and you can be there to make money. But the best part about that is that pulled together amount is going to be for the greater good. We're all going to be pulling around in the same direction. We're all going to want the same things as genuine base grassroots fans. And if you could get the likes of a James Keane or a Chris Traynor, who have got 11 and 6.2% respectively, to pull in to your fan-driven thing and get yourself a seat on the board, that is the only way that we are going to sit and get any meaningful change. Yes, the board have lucked out here. They've lucked out. Why? Because look at when next time that Celtic are at home. Talk about dodging bullets. But it's up to us as fans to not allow this to go quietly. There is still a couple of days in this transfer window. There is still an opportunity to flip the script and change it and make the best of a bad situation possible. Will they do it? I don't even know. I don't think so. I'm not going to hold my breath because I would probably end up dying if I done that. Don't depend on them. But it's important for platforms like us, for people like yourselves on social media, to make your voice heard. And what I would say is do it in a direct manner, but let's not disgrace ourselves in trying to get the word out there. There's ways and means to do it. We can do it properly, and that's what I want to see. I wouldn't be surprised, as I say, if we see something from some of our fan groups We've seen banners, we've seen protests, we've seen statements, things like that coming out. We need to make our voice heard as much. And in terms of, we talked about boycotts, trying to send a message, and it's true, sack the board doesn't work. It's different times. Will boycotts work? There's always the flip of that, isn't it? Where you say you're punishing the side, you're not backing the side on the pitch. They need that backing. We need all the help we can get. We don't want to capitulate. We are disappointed, extremely disappointed. You could say bitterly disappointed, but it's still so early in this season that it's important for us to try and rise for this in the best possible way, where we can make our voice heard, try to look and push for change, but also support the guys that are in situ, because this is what we saw. Remember last time, first season back for Rodgers here, he got a lot of traction, he got a lot of investment from the side. And yes, he's only doing what he's doing now, but he's asking questions, pushing the envelope, same with better quality. And what that does, it eroded the sense of well-being and the sense of worth inside the team. We dropped, and then thankfully we picked it up and we kicked on. So you can see how there have been bumps in the road, and that's the balancing act, isn't it? You don't want it to feed into the pitch. You don't want to make it worse than it could potentially already be. So that's what we need to do. But yes, we need to make our voice heard, and we need to sort of make a stance. What I would say is, and you'll say, Stevie, you're totally contradicting yourself here. And yes, I am to an extent. But see that Europa League package that they're going to email you about? They're going to say, 4 games, what 150 quid? What do you think? Let me know. How much was your package last season for the Champions League? And then just deduct a wee bit off it. What was that? Let us know. Boycott the Thursday Cup. That is exactly what I was going to say. Get that right in the fucking bin. Excuse my French, but you've got to be direct here. That's the problem. We will just say don't go to it. But unfortunately, with the waiting lists and everything else, in spite of the shortcomings, the waiting list is as long as your arms. And see, if you don't take up your season ticket package, I can probably guarantee you that some schmuck, some poor fool will. Somebody out there will take it, and they will just, they'll be absolutely duped. They'll go and they'll take it, and they'll buy it up, and they'll pay whatever it costs, and they'll fill the seat. Probably an increase, because we know you get the Champions League package, and then if they don't sell certain seats, they sell individual seats and stuff like that. And that's what you will end up with. You'll end up with that. You'll end up with somebody spending more, and ironically giving them more money than they should have got. But I think I don't think if you don't turn up to that game, if you don't give that revenue, that in itself will be a huge, huge message to this board. That's not what we want, that's not what we're tolerating. And there you go. Apparently the waiting list is up to 7 years. It's absolutely crazy, isn't it? Mental stuff to think that that's how long it is to wait for a season ticket. And there's more than people happy to do that. But that would send a message, partial stadium on these nights. And again, I'll bring these nights up there. At the same time as well, would you really, really want to go out there and pay for some of these games? That, there's some all right games in there. Of course, look at the pot one. I'm looking at Roma. I'm looking at Aston Villa. They're not phenomenal teams. They're not like, oh my God, I have to beat that game. It's decent games. But I mean, look at some of the other stuff. Go ahead, Eagles. Wouldn't that be funny? Yeah, that'd be hilarious. And then some absolute plankton, some total guff. Bran, Genk, Rijeka, come on. And then even look at your pot two teams. That's fallen giant city, isn't it? Do Celtic fit in there like a glove? Are Celtic fallen giant city? Is that, unfortunately, the reality of our situation? Have we manufactured ourselves into being a Europa League side? I don't know. But anyway, I'll get out your hair. It was good talking to you. Unfortunately, it's a garbage talk subject. So until next time, take care of yourselves. And as always, hail, hail.